Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi, managing editor of Canada's podcast, taking care of business today with Keyli Loeppky, who is director of Alberta and Interprovincial Affairs for the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. Thanks for joining us today, Keyli.
Thanks for having me, Mario.
Well, we're going to talk about a report that you folks have put out called the State of Internal Trade Report, basically Interprovincial Cooperation Report Card. First of all, tell me just the scope of the report. Like what's the report all about and what were you looking at?
Yeah, so for the past 3 years, we are grading governments across the country on their efforts to reduce internal trade barriers that they have. So we are grading the federal government, all the provinces and territories on how willing they are to break down barriers that are impeding the flow of goods, services, and people.
Hmm. So what was a key finding from this year's report?
Yeah, so unfortunately, not too much has happened in the internal trade world. So really, progress has been very, very slow. Very few barriers have been removed over the past year. These things are slow. It's been 7 years since premiers signed onto the Canadian Free Trade Agreement. And since that time, we've seen very little movement on the file, unfortunately. So um, unfortunately, it's kind of a slow report, but in the context of the current productivity crisis, it's certainly something that should perk up premiers' ears and something that they should turn towards.
And what is the impact of this?
Yeah,
And
so as we've heard it in the news every day that Canada is lagging in terms of its productivity. People are calling it a productivity crisis. And with the current state of internal trade, there are some reports out there that say that eliminating internal trade barriers across the country could boost the national economy by upwards of $200 billion each year. So this is nothing small to shake a stick at. It's certainly worth looking at. Especially when, governments are hurting for cash, this is a really low cost way for them to address making productivity advancements.
hmm So tell me, I don't know, why does that still exist? Like, why are these barriers still exist? Is it a territorial thing with each different jurisdiction?
Yeah, you know what? Your guess is as good as mine. I think it's a lot of stubbornness, a
Yeah,
lot of protectionism on behalf of premiers, but also just other priorities come up and internal trade gets moved to the bottom of the priority pile. But I think at a time, like I said, where productivity is such an issue, this is something that they could turn back to, put their protectionist attitudes aside and really look towards the benefits that this would bring across the country.
and Keely, what about I don't know if you can answer this, but how do we as a country compare to other countries when it comes to this? Like, obviously our friends south of the border would be the most closest comparison, right? Because of all their states, et cetera. Like, how are we
Yeah.
compared to that?
Yeah, so unfortunately, Canada's fairly well known as being a country where it's difficult to do business within the country. Canada has made international headlines in terms of not being able to move alcohol across provinces.
Yeah.
As a true economic union, this doesn't really shine a great light on the economic opportunities within the country. If we do want to be that true economic union, some big steps have to be made.
And I wasn't that in the news just recently between Alberta and BC with the wine.
Yeah, so the two provinces recently signed a memorandum of understanding, looking to come to an agreement on the movement of wine between the two provinces, which great step forward, but the wine is not flowing quite yet.
Yeah.
So we really encourage these talks to speed up, but also that's only one alcohol product between two different provinces. We are a much larger country than that. We need to look at all types of alcohol products, wine, craft spirits, craft beers
Yeah.
across the entire country and making sure that the movement of those products is available to all Canadians.
Okay, and a last thing, Keely, like what needs to be done here? Like, what is the CFIB urging the government, obviously, to get rid of everything, but any recommendations you have for government right now?
Yeah, so one easy way to start to eliminate these barriers is through mutual recognition. So saying, a cookie that's produced in Ontario is good enough for a consumer that's in Alberta without having to look through all the regulations that differ between the two provinces. So what's good enough for you is good enough for us. Let's move forward. So that's mutual recognition. But what that comes down to is some political motivation. We need a leader within the premiers to step forward, step up and say, let's move forward with this. Let's move forward with mutual recognition, whether that's unilaterally going at it alone or through a regional partnership or cross country, ideally. But taking that first step, and hopefully others will follow suit shortly after.
All right. Well, thanks very much, Keyli, for joining us today.
Thanks, Mario.